On episode 222 of the Tennis Files podcast, you'll learn about the best rackets for your game in 2021 with special guest Sam Jones. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the podcast, episode 222, aka a set of ducks or a set of deuces. If you play poker, then you'll know that reference. But today I have an interview for you with Sam Jones from Tennis Express. And if you are a longtime listener of the show, then you probably remember me interviewing him on episode 103. I did not memorize that. I looked it up a while back, but I'm very glad to have Sam back. He is also a certified Master Racquet Technician in addition to his role as a playtester and content writer at Tennis Express. And Sam has always been fascinated by new racket and string technologies and how they can help players improve their games and avoid injury, which is a big reason why I brought him on. So we're going to talk about all things rackets, including the best rackets for different levels, the best rackets for control and spin, and we're also going to mix up some talk about strings as well, how they impact your rackets, and how to tell the difference between whether it's the racket or the strings when you're trying them out. I'll also talk a little bit about other modifications such as lead tape. So if you are a gearhead or you are looking for a new racket or you're just interested in rackets or strings or gear generally, then you will really enjoy this episode. So I will dive into it, but first let me give you the pun of the day. Yes, I'm still going strong with this, for now at least. No hate mail yet on it. Very surprised. So here is my pun of the day. I heard my neighbor playing tennis at 3 a.m. It was so loud that I yelled at him for making such a racket. Get it? Racket, racket. All right. Well, with that beautiful pun that I hope you really enjoyed, let's get to the episode. So without further ado, here is my interview with Sam Jones. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. And it's great to have Sam Jones from Tennis Express on the show. Really excited to talk to Sam about how to choose a proper racket for yourself and the best rackets available these days. It's funny because I recently got a few demos from Tennis Express to check out and really enjoyed it. And I think I'll have to probably demo some more to nail down what racket I want to transition to potentially. So it's always really fun to just check out the latest and greatest. So first off, Sam, welcome to the podcast. Really excited to have you on.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime, Sam. I think it's been a while since we last did some content together. So I just want to get straight to it, Sam. So what is your best advice for those of us who are really interested and excited to get a new racket, or if we're just hopping on to play tennis for the first time? What are some things that we need to look for?
So the first thing I'll say is that right now, a lot of the online stores, just like Tennis Express, we do a demo program, and the demo program is just so important because it allows you to kind of take a few rackets out, maybe 3 very, very different frames, and just kind of find out where you are, what it is that you're liking, what it is that you're looking for, maybe even on occasion, what it is that you don't like. It really doesn't matter as much where you start because ultimately you're trying to eliminate things and kind of find out where it is that you want to go with your racket purchase. I think one thing to stay away from is kind of just buying a racket, oh, okay, I'll see this racket and buy it and be it at a academy or like a Dick's Sporting Goods or something. You might get your $70, $80 racket, but I try to use the analogy of, there's a new iPhone every year, right? Well, what if you had a chance to try an iPhone for 6 weeks or a month and kind of see if that model was going to work for you? And if it didn't, you could just send it back and try a different one. And I kind of feel that way with rackets. It's it's less expensive than an iPhone for sure, but you want to make sure that you end up with the right one, especially when you're going to battle with it.
Yeah, definitely, Sam. I mean, I remember back in the day, I tried like an old pro staff, and I was really excited, and I thought that it was awesome. It was from a fellow player, but then the next day I tried it again, and it was felt terrible. So it really depends on the day sometimes. So you do have to find that consistency. So, Sam, one thing that I'm really curious to ask you about is regarding how to differentiate, whether what you're feeling is coming from the frame or coming from the strings, because sometimes, when we demo, like we feel like what we're feeling is fantastic, but sometimes, especially for novices, we don't know whether that's coming from the frame itself or from the effect of the strings.
Okay, fair question. So the bottom line, and I think it was one of the Babylot engineers that sort of said like that the strings are kind of the engine of the racket. Like it is integral to the performance of the racket. Take a $16 racket that's made of aluminum and put a $20, Luxilon ALU power in there, and it's still not going to feel. You know what I mean? It's kind of like having a Ferrari and putting unleaded in there. Like it's not gonna really be the same kind of deal. I think as far as telling the difference, where you're going to get into a gray area is that tennis players feel something, and whether they know what they're feeling or their perception of what they're feeling, it's happening, and in their mind it's happening. And so all I would say is I might pick up a racket and go, well, I really like this racket, but these strings are mush. And you might pick up the exact same racket and go, man, I really like these strings, but this racket's not doing anything for me. And so I guess what I would tell you is there's a lot of opinions and kind of buzzwords thrown around out there about what X racket or Y racket can do, or string one versus string two. And I think the best thing I could say is if you're trying to isolate the characteristics of a racket or a string, then you need to have a control. Okay, for example, if you've had a racket for 10 years and you really like it, but you test a lot of different strings, before you try a new racket, you should probably settle on a string that you're comfortable with and you're familiar with. So at least you're not, okay, I'm trying a brand new racket with a brand new string that I've never used before. I mean, that's going to be two very different things that are going on. It's going to be hard to attribute, one of the things to the other. So ideally, if you were to, demo rackets, you'd say, okay, well, my string of choice is, well, let's just stick with Luxilon ALU power. That's what I like to play with pretty much regardless of the racket. It's at 48 to 50 pounds. If I'm trying new frames, I'm probably going to start there. You might not be able to get Luxilon ALU power all the time, but a medium firm polyester string at that tension will give you it will give you more information about the racket that you're trying, instead of just, man, we've got so many different things going on here. The biggest thing, Merban, is that people change multiple things at the same time. They go different tension, different racket, different string, and it's almost impossible to get like any real tangible data from that because you've just changed too many of the variables.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sam. So I'm going to give you an actual example, and this is obviously from me. So if I am playing with a Pure Aero VS with Hyper G at 17 gauge at 54 pounds, and then I get a demo of a Yonex VCore 98 with Polytour Pro, do you think there's too much of a variable where I should probably restring that racket to my Hyper G to like make absolutely sure that it's the racket that's doing the work? Or do you think that Polytour Pro, or generally like any poly, would be like close enough where it's fine to be able to test it?
It depends on where in your search you are. I I think if you're, first demo session, you're trying three or four frames, you're sort of trying to find out what it is you're looking for, what you like, what you don't like. I think you're fine kind of just
Mm.
using a generic polyester string, or, I think as you get to, hey, Sam, I really like the VCore 98, but I'm trying to decide between that and the Gravity MP. Like I think that's where you might go, well, what is my string of choice right now? And then I might demo them, and then just when I get the rackets, have two sets of that Hyper G and plug it in there and, go with it that way. But I certainly think you can glean a lot of information early on in the demo process from, the racket kind of strung with whatever, but with some circumstances, right? Like you're not going to demo a racket with natural gut string and go, oh man, this feels amazing, because it's going to.
Yeah, no, actually, that's fantastic advice. Appreciate that. So, I do want to get some of your playing background, and then transition to like what you've tested and what you've liked. So, can you tell us about like your current level of play and background as well, if you'd like?
So I played in college, Division III at Southwestern University. Really, really enjoyed that experience. Got to travel around and play. I feel like a lot of players that were better than me, but that's what it's all about, is seeing how you measure up. But post college, I taught tennis for 10 years. I played some 5-0 league tennis and played a few tournaments here and there. I wouldn't describe my level as high as I was in college, but I'd say I'm a solid 4.55, 4.62 player. So I know it doesn't quite work like that, and I'm not as up to date on the UTR stuff. So I don't quite know where I'm at with that. But right now, I'm probably playing a little bit more doubles than singles. But yeah, certainly getting to test a lot of rackets, which is really, really enjoyable.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great level for sure. I play 5-0 as well, and it's very challenging in the 5-0 leagues to play. Sometimes you're playing 5-5s and all that. So, but yeah, college experience and at that level is excellent. So, that with that background in mind, I'm curious to hear about your favorite rackets that you've play tested, I guess, this year, that you've liked. So, well, let us know.
Okay. There's been a lot. The manufacturers now are, I mean, it's kind of the golden era, I think, for a lot of rackets, because there are a lot of solid families out there. The Babolat Pure Aero family, endorsed by Rafa, is a huge seller.
Hmm.
One of the things that they've done with that over the years is they've made it a little more arm friendly, just a little bit more comfortable, and develop some technology just to make it, for those of us that don't have a, bicep like Rafa, they make the Pure Aero a little bit more forgiving to use for the rest of us, which is a really, really nice trend. So, this year we got the Pure Aero Rafa cosmetic, which it's not a different racket from his all yellow one, but it's just a really cool cosmetic on a great frame. A couple of others, we just had Yonex refresh the VCore Pro line. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're kind of green and purple. I've sort of dubbed it the Saved by the Bell cosmetic. Kind of reminds me of the '90s TV show. But that's Yonex's most controlled frame. And if I had a criticism of it, I guess from my level, I would say they were really precise frames and control frames, but I think for a lot of the playing population, maybe a little too dead.
Yeah.
And so with this version, for instance, with the VCore Pros, they went a little thicker in the cross section. So off the top of my head, I think the VCore Pro 97s increased 1 millimeter to 21 millimeters, from up from 20, and then the VCore Pro 100 went to 23 millimeters. And so
Mm.
they're still very much control frames, but they just give you a little bit more help. And despite what anybody tells you about not wanting help in a tennis racket, just about all of us at every level can use a little bit of extra help sometimes. The other thing about that family that they did is they elongated the shaft a little bit, kind of
Mm.
a la some older models from late '80s, early '90s. So it's just a very connected to the ball feel. It's very precise, but yeah, just a little bit more punch than in previous generations. The other, big entry that we had this year was the Blade update, to version 8. For those of you counting at home, we're on version 8 of the Blades. And despite the cool cosmetic that they did, they kind of did a sports car color shifting paint. There's a couple of under the hood adjustments that they did. And all the listeners out there know the Blade 98 is probably one of the most prominent rackets on the tour. Yeah. There's 16 by 19 string pattern and an 18 by 20 string pattern that very, very popular rackets, not just on tour, but in college and in the recreational game as well. But one of the things they did that is really pretty cool, you take off the replacement grip on a racket, and typically what you've got is kind of a foam molded handle, and then the end cap at the bottom is stapled into that foam. And so with the V8 blades, to try to create more torsional stability, now the graphite extends all the way down to the bottom where the end cap attaches. And so that end cap is actually attached into the carbon fiber instead of just the foam. And so really what you're going to get is, a lot of players are, especially in this day and age, are generating tons of torque, holding the grip pretty low on the forehand side. So if you're one of those players and it's, the worst thing you can feel is kind of a loose butt cap that's, twisting around in your hand, it can really make you lose confidence. And that's something they sort of undertook for this version. And then they kind of did a cool, they've got a plant-based plastic now that they're using for the grommets, which is, really smart. And it kind of ties in with Wilson in their sustainability initiatives, with their Trinity ball and trying to just reduce plastic waste. Those are the two that kind of jump out at me right now. There's some new technology from Head that's kind of on the way that's set to debut early next year. I think it's a new racket line. I've seen some test rackets out online, and I have hit, and it's pretty unique. So really, really exciting. And then of course, these guys don't really rest on their laurels with this stuff. They're always kind of thinking, seems like 2 years ahead. One of the smaller brands had a new racket. I guess they're not as small anymore, but Technofiber. Mm-hmm. They have their popular model that Daniil Medvedev won the U.S. Open with, the T-Fight RS 305. But they also have the signature model now for Iga Swiatek. It's a really, really nice frame. It's kind of I'd say almost a more user-friendly T-Fight, a little bit more maneuverable. It's got an old school gloss finish on it, but it's a really solid frame as well.
Wow, a lot of great rackets out there. And actually, what's your playing style? I'm curious with the rackets now in mind. Like, are you hit heavy topspin, or are you more classical game, or how would you describe your game?
I think one of the things that happens when you teach tennis for a while is you kind of end up doing some things that aren't great for when you're playing. For instance, you're teaching tennis, you're trying to match the level of the lesson, right? Like if you're doing some live ball situational stuff, you're not going to hit Rafa forehands to someone that's working on, trying to find the ball in their sweet spot, right? So I think I experimented kind of with a lot of different grips, and now sometimes I'm like, okay, close your eyes and grab the racket. How are you holding it? Because that's going to be your forehand grip for the day. But I can play a little bit more spin on the forehand than I probably did growing up. I would still say I'm not really a back up 10, 15 feet behind the baseline and just grind somebody down. My game is based more on timing, selectively trying to take a ball early, get in and, finish points at the net. The reality is it's trying to win points any way I can. So if that's a game style, that is it. And I'm not talking about cheating. I'm just talking about finding a way. Just want to be clear about that. I probably have my two-handed backhand's probably my best shot, because it doesn't break down as easily. But I kind of find myself in all sorts of areas of the court, and sometimes wondering, how did I get here and how am I going to get out of this? But yeah, so my game style is get it done. How about that?
I like it. I like it. And then, so given that background, what's your frame of choice? What are you using now, or what's your favorite stick?
So one of the things that has changed, you hear the commentators talk about it all the time. Like, we've had graphite rackets for a while, but the polyester strings have been, a really big change to the pro game, and then it's obviously kind of come down to the other levels too. But I like right now a racket that's got a little more flex than I used to.
Mm.
I used to play rackets that were a lot firmer. The rackets themselves were, the frames were, so pretty powerful, not a lot of flex at contact. But back then I was using really soft multi-filament strings, right?
Mm.
So sort of like firm frame, soft string. Okay. And now I'm a little bit more on the softer frame, softer flex, and stiff string, firm string. And so, I mean, I guess they're kind of, two sides of the same coin a little bit. But what I like about the softer flex, so I use the Head Gravity Tour, and it's kind of the one that's got the two-sided color scheme, flip cosmetic. But I just like it because I feel like I can kind of string it with whatever I want, and pretty much I can go tighter, I can go looser, but I feel like that flex protects my arm and it helps dampen the vibration. So it keeps it comfortable, but I can sort of have my pick of the litter as far as strings and not worry too much about, oh man, this string's going to be too firm in this racket. Contrasting with some players that want stiff frame and stiff string. And, at this point for me, that's going to be too firm. And so I kind of like the freedom that I get as far as tweaking strings and trying different strings. And I can do that as long as I use a pretty low flexing racket.
Very interesting, Sam. I mean, what advice would you give for players with that combination? Because I'm trying to figure out, like, I guess, does the racket dictate in terms of if you want to go like stiff frame and then like soft string versus flexi frame and stiff string? Like, well, what's your general advice on people on how to like figure all that out?
I mean, what you get into here is a lot of like what you feel is what you feel. Okay. So, one of the things that's made the Pure Drive such a popular racket, right, is that, you can string it up with RPM blast at 52 pounds all the way, and really high level players love it. They love the firm feel, the, explosive power. They feel like they can get the rotation on the ball that they're looking for. Modern topspin players. Now, the Pure Drive can also work for somebody that plays more of an old school flat game. Maybe they like to take the ball early and get into the net, but they might string it up with a soft multi-filament, just a lot tighter, or even natural gut at, 58, 60 pounds. And I mean, that thing is going to be a very, very stable rocket launcher. I mean, you're going to be able to get the ball on your opponent very, very quickly. And so I think what you're trying to do is take your own game and say, okay, what feel do I like? And then kind of contrast that with what feel do you need to be successful and confident on the court. For me, I feel like with the advent of polyester strings, they lose tension faster than any other material.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's gotten a little better as far as that goes, but you're still talking about major tension loss on polyester strings. Well more than a multi-filament, well more than natural gut. Of course, everything pales next to that. But I think what that kind of allows me to do, and I can string my own rackets too, is that I know I've got a flexible racket, and so I'll try polys. I'll try different ones, and not stress about it. I'm kind of curious about the new strings, and as a playtester, it's nice too because I'm always having a different string in my racket. Like gun to my head, I'm not sure what string I tell you that I would use right now, just because I'm testing so many. There's a lot of great ones out there, but when you're constantly restringing and cutting them out and testing more, I mean, it is a little bit. I almost think if I just stopped testing completely and went to just playing tennis, I'd have to kind of find like okay, I like this string. This is my string. I'm going to buy a reel. I'm going to stick with it for a while just so I kind of know what to expect on the court. In general, I think I kind of skipped over the first part of your question, but in general, I kind of advise players like if you're switching to a pure drive or a pure arrow or like a Dunlop SX 300 or something to get more spin. If you do string that up with a multi-filament, you're going to eat through the strings pretty quick.
Mm.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of times that means you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and the strings are doing what they're supposed to be doing as far as imparting spin on the ball. But kind of just knowing if you go to that pure arrow Rafa or pure arrow racket and you're looking to generate more spin, you're also going to be along with that cutting through those strings. And so that's where you go, okay, well, all things being equal, can I play the pure arrow and keep a multi-filament in there for 3 weeks? If I can, then more power to me. That's pretty good. If I can play the pure arrow though, and I get about a week out of a multi-filament string, then that's probably, for most of us, that's probably not going to be good enough. And I need to go to something that's a little bit more durable. And some of the polys have a little bit more of an abrasion resistant coating to help out with that.
Gotcha, Sam. Appreciate that. So this next question is pretty selfish, I admit. It's but I think it'll probably help some people anyway, just with the general categorization. So I play currently with a Pure Arrow VS, the previous version, the 1620. I think it might have been off the Aerostorm mold, maybe. So it sounds like you're familiar with that. And I play with Hyper G at 17 gauge at 54 pounds, crank strung. So I am getting a little bit of like wrist pain recently, although it's very minor, but I feel like I do want to make some sort of adjustment. So in that general sort of situation, what's the first step that you would take to help with that? Because I know there's definitely some people out there who are probably experiencing some issues with their racket and some pain. So what would you do?
So, Hyper G, Solinco, they have a really good catalog of polyester strings. The one thing that I learned about that brand is that for me, with pretty much every one of their strings, I'm a lot more comfortable in the high 40s, even in some cases mid 40s, like 45, 46 pounds. Because I do feel like that material is just a lot firmer when it comes off the racket. Like when you restring it and you pull the racket off the stringer, I just feel like Solinco, it's just a very firm, tough material. And
Yeah.
so I've actually found a lot more success with that brand. I've used kind of Confidential is the string from Solinco that I probably would move toward. But I had to learn, I was stringing it kind of apples to apples with RPM or ALU power. And I think
Right.
what I learned is that for me, Solinco was more maybe like 15% lower instead of 10% lower.
Mm.
They always say like, if you're stringing this, next to a synthetic gut string, then you should go 10% less.
Yeah.
But I've always found the sweet spot for me with the Solinco line to be lower. And I still feel like I'm getting control. I don't feel like it's a slingshot. So it's a little jarring at first, when you go that low, but I do feel like some of the material now you kind of have to, tweak with it a little bit and, go about that way. Now, as far as your racket choice, that's a sweet frame. And I actually think there's several tour players that maybe under some disguise are still playing that Pure Arrow VS. It's a really nice frame.
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to say with the variables, right? Like, okay, I've got some wrist pain or I've got some elbow pain. The tendency is ace bandage, Advil, new grip size, new string, new tension, new racket, right? I mean, there's like this whole worksheet that kind of comes up in your head about what can you do to get rid of this. And of course, you do like 8 things and then you're like, I wonder which one of those 8 things really helped most.
Right.
Because it might not. So the first thing I'd say with any arm thing, as I have the legal scroll across that says
Yeah.
go see your medical professional. Okay.
Smart man.
There is no, right. So there is no like string that is, oh, okay, you've got tennis elbow, use this string and you won't miss a beat. Like you probably have done something, and it is an overuse thing with a lot of tennis elbows. So first might just be rest and ice, and just give it a little bit of a break. The second thing I would say about you use an all hyper G, right? Hyper G
Yeah.
the whole way.
Hmm.
Okay. So the second thing I would say is, like, with a polyester string, just because the string isn't broken doesn't mean that it's still doing what you need it to do. And so Hyper G is designed to be a control string. And what I might argue is, after 15 to 20 hours, maybe a little bit more, depending on, kind of if you're playing doubles, you could probably eke out more. But if you're, playing a lot of singles and taking big cuts at the ball, you're putting a lot of maybe unseen wear and tear on that polyester string. And so
Hmm.
I would probably advise at first, a little bit of rest, and then maybe tweak the tension, go down a couple of pounds. And then, lastly, I would just say, hey, if it feels really good, for 10 to 15 hours or 15 to 20 hours, be kind of disciplined about cutting it out and saying,
Hmm.
okay, I like this performance, but almost kind of set yourself a calendar notification or something that just says, hey, I mean, remember, these strings are designed to kind of be firm. Okay. They're firm feeling strings. And so as they lose any kind of tension, I almost feel like you're having to overswing to get the
Mm.
same result. And I don't have the science to back that up, but I feel like
Mm.
that can result in more arm fatigue. You feel like your shots are going longer, so you're trying to swing faster to get the ball to come down. And in some
Yeah.
instances, you might be able to, but you're also, think about your car, right? Like if you're in the red on RPMs for too long, like, it's not good for the engine. And I feel like
Mm.
when these polyester strings kind of start to go and you start to lose a little bit of control, we're swinging harder to make up for that. And I feel like that's where some of that arm fatigue can come into play. And before you know it, you're like, dang it, I'm sorry guys, I can't play this week. And that's the worst feeling, when you can't play because you've got something going on with your elbow.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sam. Definitely have not been super disciplined about, cutting strings out. And, I mean, that's probably common. A lot of people, they want to get maximum use, but sometimes it's not worth it, especially when you're feeling adverse effects. So, Sam, in terms of like the best rackets, I did want to get a little bit of a list going too, so that, viewers and listeners could check them out and, hopefully visit Tennis Express and demo them. So, what are your top frames for beginner players? I mean, I guess maybe 2.5 to 3 something ish players.
Okay. Well, it's a little different now. Like a while ago, it was pretty easy. You had rackets that were like 115 square inch head size. Okay,
Right.
well, that racket's going to be pretty lightweight and it's going to offer a lot of power. Now there still are some models like that, but the trend certainly is the racket families. So, if I'm a beginner, and I'm taking lessons and I'm kind of trying to learn the proper technique about, how to strike the ball and where, how high I want it to be when when I hit it, and, proper spin and mechanics, then I would say maybe the super oversized is not the best racket to go
Mm.
with. I would recommend more. Across all brands, they kind of have like this subtle little designation behind the name. So, let's take Head for example. You've got the Speed Pro, which is what Novak endorses. Okay, and then you've got the Speed MP, which is a little lighter, a little more user friendly, and then you've got the Speed MP Lite, a little lighter, a little more user friendly. The Speed S, a little bit more power. So it kind of is a sliding scale where they're all
Mm.
trying to focus on the same attributes and helping the players, produce better shots, but they're just coming down in weight, and it just makes it more manageable for the different levels of player, right? So if you're a 4.550 player and you go out to the court with a racket that's, 9.6 ounces unstrung, I feel like you're going to get knocked around a bit, right? Like
Yeah,
you might be loving
definitely.
how light it is, but it's kind of like bringing a knife to a gunfight, I guess. Like you just
Yeah,
feel like no matter what you're doing, you're not able to handle pace coming at you or absorb and redirect. I think with more beginner players, they're not going to be dealing with just that onslaught of big shots and heavy spin. So I think like the Aero Pro Light
yeah,
or the Speed Light, I think these models are going to be right up their alley. And then it's kind of cool because you still get the cosmetic of your favorite player. So if you're a huge Rafa fan, and you
right.
play your Aero Light, you still get that vibrant yellow color, but it's in a racket that is more suited to your tendencies and your level. And you're not trying to step up and play with the RF 97 because Federer is using it, even though maybe
So
he's the
heavy.
only one in the world that should use it, right? I mean, it's a pretty difficult racket to wield.
Yeah, 100%.
Um,
So, mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, sorry. No, yeah, I mean that's a great explanation. So, I mean, I was gonna also ask you about best intermediate and advanced frames, but I mean, is the thinking along the same lines that you just kind of, I mean, there's so many different variations of rackets that you just kind of choose among the one you want, or
So again, it used to be different where you had power rackets, okay,
yeah,
and that's kind of the ones I just mentioned. Like I don't know if any of the listeners out there remember like the Wilson sledgehammers, that kind of the
yeah,
snowshoe shape. And so very lightweight, very powerful. And then you had tweeners, right? And tweeners are sort of, you can kind of have different stroke styles, but a lot of people can use this racket, like we were talking about with the pure drive. You can almost make the pure drive a very high performance, like 5.0 plus NTRP racket. And you could also bring it down. And I'd argue almost it could be a really great racket for a better 3.0 or a 3.5 level player too. And then at the other end, you're talking like Wilson RF 97 extreme precision rackets. And what I'll say is the precision rackets like your VCore Pro 97 HD, your
right,
Head Prestige Mid Plus. I mean, these rackets 100% are control rackets, and there are just less of them than there used to be. The Wilson Blade 98 1820, even that at its weight is not a typical control racket because it's a little lighter.
mm,
And so now I would say control rackets are almost going the way of the dodo. And I don't mean that like they're bad rackets. It's just I bet you 85% of all rackets now are in that tweener category. And so, that's what people are buying. And it kind of makes sense just because they're very versatile frames
yeah,
that players can improve with and get better with and really keep using. You don't really have to graduate if you have a tweener frame. You can kind of grow with it, and it can grow with your game, and maybe you're altering strings and some things as your mechanics improve or you're hitting the ball bigger. But I do think it's kind of a tweener world right now. It's not as easy to say this racket gives you more power, bar none, 100% of the time. Well, unless we have the golf club machine that swings the club at the same speed, at the same accuracy every time. I mean, we're all humans, so maybe one day the Pure Aero Tour, which is really heavy, maybe I'm crushing balls with it, but maybe I'm a little tired the next day and I can't
right,
get a ball past the service line. So I think power can kind of be relative there. Like it's difficult saying, if you use this racket, it is more powerful. I just think you've got stroke styles and frequency of play. You've got a lot of different things, but in general, that category is dominant right now. And as I said before, it's more which weight are you in the tweener category? Are you a pure drive tour, which is around 11.7 ounces strung, or are you a pure drive, which is a little over 11 ounces strung, or even lower? Are you a pure drive light, which might be just under 10 ounces strung? All of them kind of feature the same technology, but they're just different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, it seems like the weight is very important. If you had to pick a line or two racket lines for somebody who hits with a lot of spin but is looking for control, what would you advise?
Let's see. Um, they hit a lot of spin, but they're looking for more control, right? Is
A
that
little more
the
control. Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
So, right now, Babolat did something with the, you have the previous version, but they have a
Right, the
new
VS.
Pure Arrow VS. And so that is the same technology of the Pure Arrow, but it's a little bit of a denser string pattern with the 1620. One of my favorite string patterns, by the way. I wish we would see more
Yeah,
16 by 20. But it's the same aero modular technology, but the beam's a little thinner. Okay, and so the head size is, instead of 100, it's 98. And I feel like it's almost like, okay, we want a racket for a pure aero enthusiast who loves it, but just wants a little bit like more precision.
right.
And I think that's a really good option. Another one, and these two get compared a lot, is the Head Extreme Tour.
Mm,
And it's a first introduced in the current generation, the Tour version, and it's along those same lines. The Extreme MP is 100 square inches. It's got a very open string pattern,
mm,
and while the number of strings is still 16 by 19 in the Tour version, the head size is a little smaller and the spacing is a lot different. So still, a spin lover's racket, but it's going to be much more precise. And, especially for those high level players, they're probably eating through strings pretty quick with the Pure Arrow or with the Head Extreme MP, just because those string patterns are more open. And with these versions, the technology and the beam is designed for aerodynamics, but they're also, they're giving you a little bit more precision with that string spacing so that maybe the strings aren't moving as much as they would,
mm.
in the other way. And then another good option from Yonex is, you started out the podcast with the VCore 98. If you kind of look at the beam, like it sort of has the same sensibilities of, a more aerodynamic feel, but kind of combined with a box beam design. So I think
Right.
that's a good kind of, I'd almost call it like a hybrid frame, mixed in old school sensibilities with a more aerodynamic feel.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, that one was a good frame. I enjoyed it. It felt like it had a tad bit too much power for me. However, I think maybe if I had put a different string or something and changed around the tension, it could have, worked. But really nice frame.
Right.
Sam, I know you don't have a lot of time left, so just real quick, do you have any advice on like using lead tape and modifying the racket? Like, is that something you do as well?
So I kind of went through a lead tape phase where I was tinkering and adding a lot of lead tape to. I think one of the things I will still do from time to time. I grew up in the era of, where rackets, if they were heavy, they had to be very headlight. Okay, so
Mm,
like, when I'm in high school, I mean, it's a Wilson Pro Staff 6.1, which is, 12 and a half ounces or more strung. And the only way like you can move that on the court is if it's pretty significantly headlight. Nowadays, like we were just touching on with tweener frames, more of these tweener frames strung are around 3 to 4 points headlight instead of 6 to 7 points, like, they might have been back then. And so if I do one tweak with lead tape, or instead of lead tape, I might put a leather grip on a tweener racket. And I do that basically because I just like that older school headlight construction, like that feel. I don't know if it's just that I'm a dinosaur, but it just feels a little bit more familiar to me. And again, you're adding some weight to the handle, so it might change the maneuverability a little bit, but it's not going to be in any real sense. As far as lead tape advice, thing I will say, and I myself was guilty of it, but less is more. And you can add 1 to 2 grams at the 12 o'clock position. Like, you use my bald head here, right? So like 12 o'clock position is the top of the
Perfect
head.
visual. Yeah.
I see people put 12 grams up there. And I mean, that even 1 to 2 grams is really going to change the way that racket feels in motion. And so I would just advise, hey, like, I want to put it under the bumper. Don't put stuff under the bumper until you kind of try it and pull it off, and try it and pull it off, and see what it is you're looking for. I think the most popular use that you see on the tour is probably still that 3 and 9 o'clock position, on the sides. Same kind of principle. It doesn't take much weight there to just make it almost feels like, again, I'm not a physics guy, so I don't know this, but it almost feels like it keeps that racket frame square at contact a little bit more. So
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more stability at contact. Maybe if you're a flatter ball hitter, it feels like it kind of keeps on the line of the ball a little bit longer. Whereas, if you've got a racket that just feels a little too whippy, like maybe that helps you sort of make sure you're getting through the line of the ball. Nowadays, for the most part, with my lead tape usage, it's more about matching. And I'll try to just, okay, if I've got 3 gravity tours, I'm not a perfectionist, but I'd like them to be, within a couple of grams,
Sure.
and swing weight as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you experiment with lead tape at all? Do you feel like that's helped your game, or what do you think?
Yeah, thanks for asking. No, it's interesting because very recently, like last week, I think was the first time, might be surprised about that I tried lead tape. I just was kind of lazy about it, to be honest. So I am a newbie, so I put some on 3 and 9. I think I put about 3 grams total. And, because I was suffering from a little bit of instability issues, especially on volleys with my frame. And the thing is, it did help in that particular area, but I hit with a lot of spin and I really like a whippy racket. So it made it a little sluggish for me. So I feel
Right.
like, I might have to try a different position, maybe 10 and 2 or 12 or something else. I don't know, but I'll have to figure that out, I guess.
Yeah, 10 and 2 can work because it keeps some of that torsional stability, that sideways stability in the frame, but it also like raises the sweet spot a little bit.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you know this, but most of the time now, modern players are hitting the ball higher in the hoop. We're not hitting like low in the head very often. If if things are going well, we're not. We're trying to hit more up higher, like slightly above center on the racket. So that lead tape configuration at 10 and 2 kind of gives you the best of both worlds. But it brings up an interesting point about kind of the slippery slope of lead tape.
Yeah.
And what I would tell you is like, hey, keep it at 3 and 9, but reduce it until it doesn't feel sluggish.
Hmm.
So maybe you're still getting like some subtle help with your volleys, but
Yeah.
ultimately, if you're having to hit 3 or 4 volleys in one point, like, you're probably in trouble anyways.
Yeah.
And you're going to be hitting more ground strokes. So I'd kind of say, well, like back in the day, Roddick, he didn't come in much, right? Like, he didn't come in all that much. He played
Right.
from the baseline way more. And I feel like a lot of those guys are like, well, where am I going to be on the court? Okay, well, I want help where I'm going to be on the court the most.
Yeah.
I can figure out how to hit a volley to finish off the point, because most of those guys are so good from the baseline. They don't, oh, I need to change my setup so I can pick up a half volley, coming in. They want the help on 85% of their game, which is the baseline.
Right.
But it can be a slippery slope with lead tape. You start tweaking, and oh, I'm getting this. The one thing I try to tell players when they're looking to switch rackets is just, are you trying to help a deficiency in your game with a racket switch, or are you trying to amplify your skills?
Hmm.
Meaning, like, my thought has always been this: like, if you have a good forehand, okay, and that's the bread and butter of your game, I kind of feel like you could hit a good forehand with just about anything. Maybe some a little bit better than others, maybe some a little bit worse than others. But what you might look for in a racket, and this is just one side of that coin, but what you might look for is, hey, my two-handed backhand, I'm not great at hitting through the ball sometimes, and it ends up hitting short, and then they open up the court, and then I'm in a world of hurt. And so maybe I look for a racket that can help establish my two-handed backhand with more depth and consistency,
Hmm.
because I can find a way to hit a forehand with it.
Yeah.
And so, there's two schools of thought for sure. You're trying to strengthen your deficiencies as a player versus, hey, like my backhand ain't great, but I want my serve to be even bigger and I want my forehand to be even bigger. And so I think it's just kind of knowing which one of those you want to try and do. But I do stand by that. Like I feel like with my forehand, the racket change doesn't help it or hurt it much. It kind of just it's still my forehand, if that makes sense. But if I've got a racket that can help on first volleys, or especially as I've started to play more doubles, it's a little bit of a different skill set. So
Yeah.
I'm hitting more volleys than I normally would be. So I think that's where maybe if it's more headlight, like that can kind of help me out up at the net. And again, at least the way I play doubles, it's maybe a couple of ground strokes and then you're in to the net. So but yeah, that's cool. That's cool about the lead tape. I wouldn't totally bail on 3 and 9 o'clock, but maybe just use less, because it doesn't take much just to get a little bit of a noticeability in the stability improvement.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sam. Because I was wondering too if maybe I should also put some weight in the handle to like counterbalance it and restore back the headlight amount. But yeah, maybe just reducing it would be better for now. So appreciate that. Sam,
Yeah.
thanks a lot. Giving us a lot of great information today. I just want to give you the floor, just if there's anything else that you wanted to mention before we wrap up.
Okay. So how about two things? Restring your racket before you think you need to. That's the first thing I'm going to say, because a lot of people restring their racket when the center two main strings are like there's 3 inches in between them, and that is after it needs to be restrung. It needs to be restrung before that, and then further on the stringing, when the strings aren't realigning anymore, and you hit a ball and like the string kind of gets stuck, and you're having to push it back, that's a sign that the strings are not performing together the way that they should be performing, and you're probably losing a little bit of rotation. You're not getting the full mileage out of your shot. And then the last thing for me, as far as just arm health and testing rackets, is just remember there's a lot of variables, and if you're on a quest to find a new racket, try not to change too many variables at the same time. Try to, it might take longer, but I think ultimately you'll be happier with the end result. And you won't have, well, yeah, I did this, but I don't know if it was the string or the tension or the racket change or what. And then lastly, there's a lot of stuff online about what I say or what somebody says about a certain racket, and ultimately the person who buys it is the one that's going to go to battle with it, and they're the one that's going to use it. So a person's perception of what their racket is doing for them, it is their reality. And so who am I to say, well, actually, dude, that racket doesn't give you more spin? Like, okay, well, if they believe it does, then it probably is, right? I mean, that's
Right.
that's kind of the way the human brain works. So I would just say, make up your own mind. Just because some person X says, well, this string gives me more spin than any other string, well, try it for yourself, and it might and it might not. But ultimately, the user of the gear is the one that is dealing with it. And you look down at your racket, and you want to be confident in the strings that you have, and you want to be confident in the racket that you have. So ultimately, people can help with your search and help with offering advice, but ultimately the person swiping the credit card and buying the frames is you. So you want to be sure, and you want to make sure that you're comfortable with your decision.
Definitely, Sam. Awesome advice. Definitely got to test and keep track of the variables. Sam, where can people, check out rackets and demo them from you all?
So at Tennis Express, we have this really great demo page. I'm actually gonna pull it up right here so I can make sure I get the link right.
Sure.
Let's see here, demo rackets. So from the home page, you can just pull it up, tennisexpress.com. And of course, my internet will not work now. That's so wonderful.
It's okay. I'll
Um,
get it.
Make sure to
Yeah,
not edit that out.
to not edit it out. Okay, we could do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I
Yeah, so
I got it,
we've
Sam.
got the big brands: Babolat, Yonex, Head, Wilson, Dunlop. We've got all the big brands. Some of the rackets that are lighter in nature. A lot of times we skew more smaller grip sizes. So some of the heavier models you can get bigger grip sizes for demo, but just kind of keep that in mind.
Excellent. Yeah. So tennisexpress.com/demo-tennis-rackets. And we will have that link in the show notes for everybody to click so they can check it out. And I just use it myself. And it was very easy to order, to test them, and to ship was a breeze. So ship them back. So that was great. Awesome, Sam. Well, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it. I really like talking about gear, so it was a pleasure to have you on. And I'm sure people will learn a lot from this one. And I'm gonna re-listen because I am, thinking of switching. So, or at least changing something. So we'll see how that goes. But thanks for your time, Sam. Appreciate it, and looking forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Merban, and keep me updated on your racket search and how the demo process is going.
I will. Thanks, Sam.
Bye bye.
All right. I really hope you enjoyed my interview with Sam, and definitely do encourage you to check out their demo program. Just check the link in the show notes page, and you will find that link that you can click on to demo rackets. Demoing is definitely a very important step to finding your racket. It's very rare that you can just buy one off the internet based on reviews because everybody is different. They have different preferences and feel of a racket. A racket can feel amazing to one player and have a lot of control, and to another player it could be overpowering. So definitely try out rackets before you buy them, and the same goes for strings and such. Alrighty then. Well, I really hope that you enjoyed this interview, and if you did, please leave a review for the podcast, and you can do that at tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts, or just leave a review in your favorite podcast app of choice that you use to listen to the show. And I do want to leave you with a quote, as I often do at the end of the show, and this one is by James Clear, who has a great book out that you should check. I am blanking on the name, of course. That's why I'm going to look it up on my computer. And it is Atomic Habits, so that's a great book that you should check out. And the quote from James is, "Focus is the art of knowing what to ignore." Love that quote there. All right, well, thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files podcast. This is Merban signing out.